current U.S. policy on the Russia-Ukraine war is leading to one of two outcomes. One, either a strategic failure, or two, nuclear war. It's hard to even say that out loud and not just like do a double take of, wait, what? Listen to me carefully. And as you're about to see very graphically portrayed in this video, we're going to receive one of two outcomes, either a disastrous failure, or it could be a catastrophic loss and a descent into nuclear war. Now, there has been a lot of people that don't believe that or are not aware of it. And I'm going to show you some things here that you may not have seen before. And when you put these things in context, I think that you're going to come to the realization that this is a much more serious situation than you may have think it is. Because right now, we are careening with eyes wide shut towards a disaster or a horrible outcome, one or two. And we need to do something quickly to change course while we still can. Now, Canadian strategic thinker and well-known author is, I just lost his name, Jordan Peterson, had this nailed early. He called this, and he understood what was at stake very, very early in this war, with just the first couple of months when he went and told us, first of all, that Russia's not only not going to lose, they can't.
If the buildup of NATO forces continues, and they are in fact then moved into battle position, a real likelihood of the use of tactical nuclear weapons on the Russian side to deal with that threat. 300,000 have been very recently put on high readiness, prepared for immediate deployment. All this appears to be based on the assumption that the Russians will back down if threatened enough. This didn't work for the Germans with regards to Britain in the days of the Blitz. Why would we underestimate the determination of the Russians? They have seen hardships that those of us in the West can thankfully not even imagine. We will not cow them into submission, as they will not prove willing to lose. And it's not as though the economic sanctions have been working or have been without major collateral damage. The ruble is doing just fine. I cannot see how we can defeat the Russians, because they will not allow themselves to lose.
And as he continued on there in a separate interview, he pointed out that, look, it's going to be a miracle if this doesn't engulf us all, if we don't change course.
It'll be an absolute bloody miracle if this doesn't engulf us all. And there's a high probability of that. With all of that, all that entails, what would it mean for the Russians to lose? Like, let's say that's what the West wants. We want Russia to lose. Okay, well, what do you mean by that, lose exactly? Do you want the Russians to feel that they're going to lose? They have atom bombs. What is going to happen to a country that's already paranoid and misguided if they also think they're going to lose? You think they're just going to lose and we're not going to lose along with them? That's not going to happen. And so we're playing with fire.
You think he's exaggerating? You think that, no, actually, I think that Putin could be enticed to lose. I think that maybe he would. Maybe he's overstepped his bounds a little bit or bitten off more than he can chew. And if we just put a little more pressure on, then he'll back down. Well, let's listen to actually what Putin himself has to say.
The first nuclear warheads have been delivered to the territory of Belarus, but just the first ones. This is the first batch. The use of nuclear weapons undoubtedly is theoretically possible for Russia. For Russia, it is possible if there is a threat to our territorial integrity, independence, and sovereignty, to the existence of the Russian state. We have more of these weapons than NATO countries do. They know that, and they keep telling us to start negotiations on reductions. Well, you know what? They can shove it.
That was just about a month ago. That was Putin, because he has now weathered nearly 2 months of war, of everything NATO could throw at him through Ukraine. And the Ukraine side has not been able to even dent the front line here. They've lost hundreds of thousands of people, and now they're basically begging for more. And so far, it's not coming. They're scraping the barrel on more troops, trying to mobilize another 500,000 people, and they're having to literally force them off the streets to join the army. How good a fighter is that going to be? And now that you have the United States gave what is $113 billion through the first 18 months of the war, And now then most of that money is gone, and we haven't even approved anymore, but we're only seeking about 60 billion. And I don't know that they're going to get that. Europe simultaneously gave 100 billion before, and now they've got another 50 billion tranche on the table, and that's being held up. So it's not even clear that Ukraine's going to continue to go on. But all of these factors seem to be oblivious on some of America's most well-known thinkers, as we see David Petraeus still says this just days ago.
I think it's very much in the interest of all NATO and all Western countries to make sure that Russia cannot succeed and that Ukraine is able to liberate all of its territory, join the EU, join NATO, and enable its reconstruction.
So he's oblivious. All the stuff that we did for a year and a half of the first year and a half of the war, and the Ukraine side didn't even dent the front lines. Russia has only strengthened it since then. And now here's David Petraeus still saying just days ago that we're seeking all the way back to the 1991 borders, which is just absurd because since 2014, the whole eastern part there of the Donbass especially rebelled against Kiev, and they have basically been fighting a civil war prior to the start of this. There's no way that that's going to get turned over quick, and yet he's still thinking that it's going to, even though everything we have done to try to do that ended in failure. It's like he is divorced and disconnected from reality. Now, if it was just one guy, if it was just David Petraeus, we could say, okay, well, that guy's, he's just kind of out there on his own. But unfortunately, the administration itself doesn't seem to know what it's doing, as the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, put it this way. Well, yeah, it's certainly a lot more than just the American people, but let's start there. Because if you're going to put us on a course that's going to take a lot of our tax money and risk nuclear war, we damn sure better be given a good strategy and somebody to lay out a path that shows here's a reasonable place where we're going to get to success, and that it's something that the American people buy into. None of that's happening. Instead, all we get is platitudes from the White House. Now, for the first, whatever, almost 18, 20 months of this war, they said Biden was, we are going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and we are not going to let the Russians win. That's what it said. Now then, there's a subtle change you may have seen about a month or so ago. Now that he's saying, well, we'll support you as long as we can. That's obviously a very small word change there, but a massive intent change behind that, because now that it's implying that I'm not sure that we're going to go just forever, but how far are we going to go? That's the big problem here. Now then, we're just drifting. And folks, we're drifting towards one of two outcomes. Either we're going to strategically fail and Russia's going to win the war militarily, or we could change the terms and, God help us all, maybe add NATO troops to it, because it's not going to be enough equipment. Equipment's not going to make any difference. It's going to be manpower. You're either going to have to put NATO forces on the ground to change the course on the tactical battlefield, or Ukraine is just never going to succeed. I mean, they've proven that. There's no rational reason to think anything otherwise. And of course, that would be the worst outcome, because the minute that you insert NATO troops into Ukraine, then the chance of nuclear escalation goes off the charts, to the point to where it's almost certain that it would happen. There is no rational reason to think that Vladimir Putin, who has the world's largest nuclear arsenal and thousands of tactical nuclear weapons, would allow his forces to be driven conventionally off the battlefield and not use nuclear weapons, because it would be 30 against 1, 32 against 1. He's not going to do that. So it would be suicidal for us to put him in that position. I don't care if you hate Vladimir Putin. You can hate him all day long, and there's a lot of reason to. He is a terrible person. He hasn't hesitated in killing his political opponents in the past. We don't like him at all, and good on you if that's the way you view it. But we have to deal with the reality, folks. Listen to me carefully. We have to deal with the reality that we have, not the one that we wish we had. We wish we had a reality where we don't like Putin, and so we want to support the Ukraine side, and Putin's going to be defeated. The 1991 borders are going to be restored, and bam, it's going to be success, and everybody's going to be happy and can't wait for the parade. That's what we'd like to happen. That's not the world we live in. We have to combine what's reasonably possible, maybe even push the limits a little bit to try to get something that's good for our side and take some risk. I'm all for that, especially as a former CAV officer. I'm all about taking risk, prudent risk. What I'm not about is being foolish and blind. We are rushing forward with our eyes completely closed. We don't even know where we're going. We don't know what we're trying to accomplish. And we are playing with fire because we don't know where we're going, but Putin does. Putin knows where he's going. He knows what he wants. He wants the security of his western flank. And he sees us as a huge threat and a huge risk. And if he can handle it conventionally, he's going to. At the moment, I don't think there's any chance that Putin would escalate to nuclear weapons in the current environment. He'll try to win on the conventional battlefield, and all of the trends show that that's a reasonable course of action for him. What would change that, though, is if suddenly the balance shifted on the other side. If we were successful at our stated objective, that all of a sudden we're conventionally driving Russia out and they're in danger of physically losing, there should be no reason in anyone's mind that Putin would not use his tactical nuclear weapons in that event, that he would allow his forces to be driven from the field, driven back into Russia and have a loss, and he would just fold his hands and go home. That's irrational to think that. It's dangerous to think that way. And we need to sober up, recognize what's going on the ground, and come up with a new plan now, while there's still chance. Look, we're going to have to eat some crow. Here, that's just the bottom line. We've been going for this maximalist objective the whole time that was never realistic. I've been saying this from the beginning. I was writing it in the months before the war even started. Don't go down this path. There's plenty of off-ramps. Take them. Get this off the table, get the war over with, keep it from happening. We didn't do that. Then as soon as the war started, again, I said, here's an off-ramp, take it. Istanbul, March, April 2022. We blew that off too, didn't do it. There hasn't been any since then. But now then, we're at a point to where, holy crap, the conventional didn't work. Ukraine may not even be able to hold the line. People want to talk about a stalemate, but I don't think that this is a stalemate. I think this is a creeping movement back to the West, and Russia's moving forward, and all of the trends for the next 12 months just build more and more power on the Russian side and less power on the Ukraine side, and that could crack in a minute, completely unexpected. But there's no reason to think that it would happen in the converse. So what we have to do is change our course based on reality, do something that has a chance to succeed, and that means we need to seek a negotiated settlement now, and we need to start right now. Don't wait another few months. Don't wait another 6 months and hope that some future offensive that Zelensky said that he's trying to do. He came out a couple of days ago, said that, yeah, they're preparing right now for another offensive. And as a military person, I've fought in armored conflict. I've studied it my entire life, and there is no path that they could succeed in doing that. If they try, all they're going to do is get hundreds of thousands of more of their sons and daughters killed for no value. And in the end, they're still going to be forced to make a negotiated settlement. Some have actually said that senior administration officials, quoted in Politico a couple of weeks back, said that the administration was thinking now they wanted to go on something called a hold and build strategy, where for the entire 2024, they want to hold what they got, and then they want to build for some kind of big offensive in 2025 so that they can get to a negotiated settlement. And I mean, come on, folks, you don't have to be a strategic, brilliant mind to think, why would you want to wait another year and a half to try to get a settlement you can get today? How many more people would have to die for the same outcome you can get today? But as I argue, you won't get the same outcome a year and a half from now. I've been saying this from the beginning. If we'd have made a negotiated settlement before the war started, Kiev would to this day still be nominally in charge even of the Donbass. They would have some autonomy, but they wouldn't have lost any troops. They would still have political control over their whole country. They could have had that. They gave it away. Then in Istanbul in March, April 2022, again, they would have had control over the majority of their country. They probably wouldn't have gotten the Donbass back at that point. But now they're not going to get the Donbass back. They've lost a ton of cities, hundreds of thousands of their men, tens of thousands more with amputations, hundreds of thousands more with PTSD that will have to be dealt with, or it's basically a ticking time bomb in their country. And the men that they're going to need to build their future are still being pointlessly sacrificed on the battlefield every day. If you love Ukraine, if you care about Ukraine, if you want to put that little flag on your Facebook or something, man, you need to be the first one saying negotiate it into this now. We need to be putting American diplomatic pressure on both Moscow and on Kiev. And we need to say, look, all of our European allies, it's time to change course here. Let's help Ukraine defend itself. Let's help them hold the line that they got so they don't lose any more territory. We can give them more defensive weapons while we negotiate and give everybody an incentive to actually bring this to an end. That's what we should do. That has a chance to succeed. That has a chance to end the blood. That has a chance to stop the slaughter of Ukrainian people and prevent Russia from going forward. That has a shot at success. Once you get the line stabilized, once you get a negotiated into this, now then you can talk about continuing to rebuild. The remainder of Ukraine that Kiev will control can rebuild its armed forces so that they can defend against it. Of course, all of the eastern flank of NATO can continue to build up its forces so that they can give themselves some confidence that Russia will never invade again. And look, they're not going to, folks. This myth that, like Petraeus and several others keep talking about, Hodges being one of them, that, man, we have to defeat Russia now, or they're coming west and they're going to go into Moldova and Poland and all this. That's nonsense. And it doesn't even matter what Putin may say. Putin could say tomorrow that, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to go and invade those countries. It's nonsense. He can't do it. When you look at look at the military balance between all of NATO and Russia, even with the improvements that they've made. And by the way, we didn't succeed in weakening Russia because we drug this out so long. Russia's now stronger than they were in 2022. That'll be a separate issue we can talk later. But even with their increased strength, they still don't have the capacity to go even beyond Ukraine. I mean, they can't even take all of Ukraine. Just look at the map, folks. Just look at what's happened on the ground after almost 22 months of war. It's about 17% is all they've gotten so far. I think they're going to end up with more because I don't think anyone's going to take my advice here. I think we are going to continue to stumble along, and Ukraine is going to end up losing some. And I just pray to God that at that point, at some point, people eat the crow that they need and suck down their pride and do what's necessary to end the war and stop the bleeding. But even if that's, no matter when that happens, Russia doesn't have the capacity to move further to the west because Ukraine has no air force, basically. They have almost no air defense of their own, and they don't have a navy at all. NATO has all of those things, and they're building crazy, trying to crank up production of all those other things. Putin's aware of that. He may hate the West, but he's not suicidal, and he's not going to plunge his country into a war that could only go nuclear, and even conventionally he couldn't win. Do you understand what I'm saying here? The fundamentals are so clear that this can't be won, and that our current course of action cannot succeed. Let's stop being foolish and start recognizing reality, and let's bring some sanity and some practical processes into play that can end the war, can end the possibility of escalation, can end the risk of nuclear mistakes leading to nuclear conflict. All of those things can be done as long as we're willing to eat a little bit of crow, be a little bit humble, recognize reality, and act accordingly. That's what we need to do. And it's time for us to give this message loud and clear to our leaders today and say, listen, if you're actually trying to protect us, if you want to prevent anything bad from happening to us, use some sanity, use some reality, acknowledge reality, and do what has to be done. That's your deep dive for today. Thank you for listening. I ask you to like and subscribe and share this with a lot of people because, folks, many people need to hear this message. I guarantee you they need this a lot more than stuff like David Petraeus. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.